when you talk about the identities of these criminals in question. I also completely disregard from Quentin Lucas and any other official in Kansas City that it's because they're minors, because that didn't really matter so much when it came to Kyle Rittenhouse, who was 17 years old, lawfully carrying a rifle, lawfully defending his own life against a white kid toucher and a white woman beater.
This week, it was announced that 2 men had finally been charged with murder in the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade. There was a shooting during that parade. Of course, it made headlines. Everyone was worried about the perpetrators never getting caught. But 2 of those perpetrators have been caught, have been charged, and they unfortunately allegedly killed a woman and injured more than 20 other people last week. But some conservatives are pretty furious that 2 juveniles that were arrested in connection to the shooting last week still have not been identified. Now, we'll come back to that outrage. You heard some of it in the clip we showed you in the very beginning of this. But first, let's get to an update on the new suspects. The defendants were named by prosecutors as Dominique Miller of Kansas City and Lindell Mays of Raytown. They each face charges of second-degree murder, armed criminal action, and unlawful use of a weapon, according to a statement from the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office. It's believed that the shooting started after one of them got into some sort of verbal argument with someone he had no prior connection to. That is what they believe at the moment. Mays was the first person seen taking out his handgun. Miller is 18 years old, Mays is 23 years old, so they're both adults. And ballistic tests have revealed that a bullet from Miller's gun killed the 43-year-old victim here. She was a DJ and radio host by the name of Elizabeth Galvan, and she was at the parade on Wednesday with her family, and tragically, she lost her life as a result of this shooting. Now, both Miller and Mays were shot and remain hospitalized. They each are charged with second-degree felony murder, 2 counts of armed criminal action, and unlawful use of a weapon. They are each being held on a $1 million bond, and if convicted, could be sentenced to life in prison. Now, separately, entirely separately, 2 days after the shooting, there were 2 minors who had been charged with resisting arrest and gun-related offenses. Their ages and names, to Dan Alosha's point in the very beginning, have not been shared publicly, which is standard protocol when these suspects are minors. Now, police have not clarified yet whether there is a connection between the 2 who were charged with murder and the teenagers. But the fact that these 2 minors haven't had their names released is what's causing a lot of backlash from conservatives. Last week, Ann Coulter, for instance, was among those who speculated that race was the main reason why these individuals were not identified, that the identities were being kept private. And during an appearance on Bill Maher's show, here's what she said. If it were a white man shooting, we'd know who did it. That's how we know it's not a white man. I can tell you that much. The longer they go without telling you, it's not a white man. Now, Jesse Waters also weighed in on this, so let's hear what he had to say.
Kansas City says the suspects are minors, so they can't speak about it. Well, except the Kansas City mayor's speaking. He's defending the suspects. Watch.
I disagree strongly with how he would describe that situation. I certainly do think this was criminal activity. It was lawlessness, and I think that that's troubling. But thugs is a dog whistle in the most classic sense, and I have seen this dog whistle time and again.
1 dead, 22 injured, and the mayor is doing PR for the shooters. And the mayor just told us more about the suspects than the police have. They're minorities. We don't know that for a fact, but if they were white, I don't think the black mayor would be mad that they were called thugs. Journalists aren't even pursuing the story. These alleged Super Bowl parade shooters get better treatment in the media than the Covington kid.
And then you have Kyle Rittenhouse, who weighed in on the matter as well. Just a reminder, when he shot and killed 2 people during a Black Lives Matter protest in Wisconsin, he was 17 at the time, and we did find out what his identity was immediately. He says, I am trying to comprehend why the government was quick to reveal my name after I defended myself, but they still haven't released the names of the Kansas City shooters. Now let's get to the reality, because it turns out that there are different laws depending on which state you're in. And it's critical to note that the media isn't publicizing the names of the teenagers because it has a lot to do with laws in Missouri, not editorial decisions. So defendants age 17 and under in Missouri are typically adjudicated through the juvenile system, which is far more private than the system for adults. Names of the accused are not released, nor are police documents such as probable cause statements. And a press release from the local family court division announced that the two minors were being detained at the juvenile detention center on gun-related and resisting arrest charges. And they also added that it is anticipated that additional charges are expected in the future as the investigation by the Kansas City Police Department continues. Pursuant to Missouri law, hearings are not open to the public as this alleged offense involves juveniles. This is the extent of the information that the Office of the Juvenile Officer can release at this time. Now, the teens could eventually be tried as adults and then have their names and identities revealed. But first, a judicial process to decide how they should be treated has to be undertaken, which can take days or weeks. Now, in contrast, the identities of Miller and Mays, who are both adults, that was released immediately, along with the announcement of their criminal charges against them. And then when it comes to Rittenhouse, this is really important to keep in mind, because I thought of Rittenhouse as well, but it turns out that Wisconsin has different laws. Under the provisions of 1995 Wisconsin Act 27, 17-year-olds alleged to have violated criminal law are subject to prosecution as adults, and juveniles under the age of 17 can be tried as adults when they are alleged to have committed certain serious crimes. In other words, basically anyone over 17 years old is charged as an adult in Wisconsin, and therefore their identity isn't protected the same way it is in Missouri. And every state, again, has different laws on the books about the privacy of juvenile suspects. But more generally speaking, it is true that media tends, is it true that the media tends to basically identify the race of white criminals more rapidly than minority criminals? Maybe. We're gonna get into that in just a moment, but I'm gonna pause for a comment from Cenk.
Yeah, this is the world's dumbest conspiracy. So they're trying to keep the fact that the defendants here and the shooters, etc., were black. They're trying to keep that away from you. But the two adults, we know who they are, and they're black. So I guess that's a very, very poor conspiracy execution. But isn't it weird that in all those segments they never mentioned that we know who the adult males are and they're black? So if they're trying to cover up the black people did it, why did they release the names of the adults? None of this makes any sense. I'm gonna tell you why they do it in one sec. To Rittenhouse for a second, he says, I'm trying to comprehend why the government did this. Well, you should have tried a little harder. You could have figured out, hey, you live in a different state than that state. And there is no the government. This is not a federal issue. There are different state governments. But of course you didn't bother looking that up because you're a knucklehead. And I'm being very generous in that description. Okay, now, why is Fox News and all these right-wingers doing such a dumb talking point in the first place? Because it serves a lot of their purposes. One is, hey, it's not us. Because now 9 out of 10 times the mass shooters are them, the right-wingers, right? Not them in particular, but right-wing lunatics. So they're like, aha, it's black people, it's not us, not us. Number two, they demagogue against black people, all criminals, criminals. My whole life they've been doing this. And number three, their main point, and their audience loves this one, is black people get special privileges. Us poor whites are the victims in everything, but it's those black people who get to murder people and then get away with it. I mean, they're not even, well, no one got away with it, they all got arrested, but they're not revealing their identity, except they did reveal the identity of the adults. No, it's just hate, 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 and that's what this is about.
So I think that, look, in this particular case, the evidence shows that there are just different laws in different states. And that's the reason why in one case with Rittenhouse, we knew who he was immediately versus these two juveniles in Missouri. But I do think that there is a bit of truth in regard to, I mean, I've noticed it with local news reporting where they want to be extra cautious. And so let's say a crime is committed, they go out of their way not to describe the race of the perpetrator who might still be at large. And so they'll give all these other descriptive, points that you can look at and try to figure out who the suspect might be. But they purposely try to avoid race, especially when it is a Black perpetrator. And I think it's because, and I understand why this is, they don't want to feed into, in their minds, like stereotypes and things like that. And so they try to find other ways to describe the perpetrator without mentioning race. I've seen that happen in local news reporting here in LA. I'm guessing that is what they're looking at, and that's why they have this feeling. But overall, especially when it comes to these high profile crimes, I think that it mostly has to do with the age of the perpetrator, the age of the suspect. And I don't really know how to get around reporting on crime without feeding into stereotypes. But I do think that if there is a perpetrator that police are looking for, especially if it comes to a violent crime like a shooting where someone has lost their lives, any descriptive elements that the news can provide, the police can provide is critical, because you want to rely on the community to help you find that perpetrator, to report that person if you happen to see them out and about.
Yeah, look, sometimes the media gets comical in their attempt not to be offensive. So have I seen some descriptions that are absurd? Tall, dark complexion, very, very curly hair. Okay, we got it, dude. Okay, and sometimes it's somebody use an offensive word and they'll describe it in a way you can't even figure out what it is. The word that is used about women in a context of blah, 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 and you're like, you lost me, man. Just, if it's that offensive they got fired over it, tell us what it is. So we can tell, hey, should they have been fired or should they have not been fired? Anyways, but there's a very, very, very good reason why they're doing it. That's because in the past, the media has been terrible on this, especially local news. And when I was growing up, you'd see 24/7, Black individual committing crime, Black, 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 and they'd put up the face, etc. Then I found out later, it turns out that when they put up white criminals, which there were more of, maybe not per capita because of socioeconomic situations, but overall in raw numbers, but when they put up white defendants, it didn't do as well in the ratings. But if you had a Black defendant and a white victim, that scared the bejesus out of their audience and got them better ratings. So for 20, 30, 40 years in this country, media, especially local news, has been demagoguing against Black people because it helped their ratings. So now if they're a little over careful and tell us about how curly their hair is, it's not the end of the world.